Eli ran by the edge of the road, just barely on the tidy cobblestone street. His pace was too fast for a boy his age. Surely if he were to make contact with anyone at his speed and size, ill fortune would befall both of them. Eli was undeterred by this fact though, because he had confidence in the footwork that he was constantly drilling. He even believed his ability to avoid running into others might be on par with talented martial artists, though he didn't know for sure. Normally he would have taken his horse, but today a merchant caravan had come in, making it faster for him to leave the city by foot. A man stepped out from a carriage door, a slight distance in front of Eli. The man had platinum blonde hair that reached his shoulders and cold eyes like a frozen sea. In his right hand was a staff with an aqua blue gemstone fixed to the top. Eli closed the distance between himself and the stranger and went to step out of the pedestrian's way. When, without notice, the man pointed his staff at Eli and whispered a few words. Warmth ran through Eli, and a voice took hold over his mind. You can't move your legs. Eli's legs became as stiff as ice, and his body became weightless. He was going to taste the cobblestone and color it with his skin and blood. Eli closed his eyes and collided into something solid. It wasn't what he expected. His teeth remained in his mouth, and his precious face was unmangled. An arm had met him instead of the walkway. It seems you haven't been trained yet in overcoming spells that attack the mind, young Seorus, said the blonde man, having helped steady Eli to his feet. This was the same man Eli had just started dancing past. Eli's mind raced. Who was this? Why was he here? And what had just happened? Also, why was he holding a royal staff? No, I've never experienced anything like that. Are you a king from somewhere? Asked Eli, still in a state of shock. Yes, I am King Runtor of Lazarus. Your father and I have been in correspondence. From the description in his letters, I immediately recognized you. Well, I hope I haven't slowed you from getting to anything important, said the king. He certainly has the air of a king, though I've never heard of this king. As far as I know, Lazarus is filled with nomadic unwanteds. However, in these situations, I suppose it's best to just bow. Thought Eli, giving a bow to this mysterious king he'd found in front of him. Not at all, it's a pleasure to have you here in our little city, Your Majesty. May I be of service to you in any way? Asked Eli. Your father has opened his home up to me, so I'll be relying on you during my stay here. In fact, as an act of goodwill towards your father, I would like to extend my hand in hopes of having you as a pupil, said the king, pointing his staff at Eli. Hold on, we've only just met. Aren't things progressing a bit too fast? What is this, love at first sight? Well, if that is the case, you can go straight to hell along with those kinds of desires. Wait, that's not right. He did say father has been writing to him about myself. I suppose that shrewd old man of mine made me sound far better than I actually am. When I think of it that way, this could actually be a good opportunity. Thank you. What would I be learning from you? Asked Eli inquisitively. Well, contractual magic is my specialty. I've been teaching my daughter the fundamentals. Though, I think she would be happier learning them with someone closer to her age, said King Runtor. The king's eyes went back and forth, scanning Eli, making sure that Eli was, in fact, suitable for this. I see, so it wasn't my old man at all. I would just be joining in on lessons as a way to motivate his spoiled daughter. This must already be part of his daily routine, but this is an opportunity to learn something my brother doesn't. I'd better take advantage of it. I would be honored to learn under your majesty, said Eli, giving a deep and gracious bow. Excellent, then when you return home, we will draw out the plans for your curriculum, said the king, in a warm, boisterous voice. Eli nodded in agreement, bowed again, and continued toward the city gates. As he passed the mysterious king's wagon for just a second, his eyes met with two aquamarine spheres swimming in an ocean of white. Those eyes belonged to a girl. Her smoother than silk hair flowed like the shimmering water of a river cascading down the sides of her shoulders. Though Eli only saw her for only a second, he could tell that compared to other girls, she had a face that was cute enough, men might die for it. When Eli ran out of the gate, he stopped but held a jog in place in front of a guard. How long ago was it since my brother came through? Asked Eli. Ah, good to see you, Eli. He probably came through here about 10 minutes ago. It looks like you guys plan to do some training in the forest today. Be careful though, some Gisbrid have been spotted. If you see one, don't wait, start running because the rest will be coming after, said the guard. Thank you, I'll keep my eyes peeled, Eli said. He then continued into a full sprint for 2 miles. This was pretty good. Eli thought he might even be able to do a third without stopping. This placed him just above average to what most people could do, but he knew Demetrius could go even further. Reaching a place where the road and the forest met and off to the side of the road, Demetrius yelled out, while riding up to Eli on a horse. Eli panted and using the inside of his shirt, wiped the sweat from his face. Hey, you finally made it. Where's your horse? Asked Demetrius. With how the city was, I left it at home. I figured I could get here quicker on my feet. All right, I guess we're riding together. Demetrius tossed Eli a gourd filled with water. You can drink it on our way. Hop on, said Demetrius. Eli took a sip of water from the gourd, recorked it, and pulled himself onto the horse between Demetrius and miscellaneous supplies. Demetrius squeezed his calves against the horse's side, and they made their way into the forest. Following beside a ravine, they reached a bit of the wood, where the tree branches intermingled, and only splotchy beams of light passed through the top of the canopies. The boys dismounted from the horse. Despite the trees displaying green leaves, there were many dry and dead leaves littering the forest floor that crunched beneath the boys' feet. After tying up the horse, Demetrius slid out 2 wooden swords from the supplies he had brought with him. He went over to hand one to Eli, who was sloshing the water in the gourd around to tell how much was left, and with one pull he filled up his cheeks with the last of the liquid. He then tried to swallow it too fast and started coughing. Demetrius pushed the sword handle towards him and Eli grabbed it still mid-fit. These are the rules: joints are 1 point, stabbing the chest is 1 point. Everything else is half a point. We fight to 5 points each round. The game ends at sunset or when one of us can't fight anymore. Mind your edge alignment. Starting now, we have 100 seconds to get into position, said Demetrius, sharing a mischievous smile with Eli. The 2 boys took off in opposite directions. Jumping, pushing, ducking into the overgrowth. Demetrius stopped first and found himself looking at a strong branch low enough to the ground where he thought he might be able to jump up to. Sure enough, that's what he did. He climbed from one branch to another, till he was high enough where he wouldn't be obviously seen, but low enough where he wouldn't break a leg from jumping down. World facts. The word Gisbrid in Veda comes from Lazarus. The language the natives of Lazarus speak is called Lazo. Most people of Lazarus can speak some dialect of this. In addition, another language is often known. Their second language normally would be dependent on their proximity to another country. The root meaning of the words used to say Gisbrid is the same in Lazo. The way these words are said would be Kuabo, meaning noisy ghost that can't be eaten, and Zatu, meaning offspring of 2 different species that can be eaten. Thus the true name of these creatures are Lazachu, meaning the mixed noisy ghost that can be eaten. Gisbrid live on every continent. Depending on the continent's environment, the creatures take on a variety of looks and features. The only other carnivore similarly adaptive is the dragon. The conjoining elements that help distinguish the Gisbrid would be as follows: pack hunting, cackling, and the ability to run and climb. A nickname for them in certain parts of Pembroke is cackling tree runners. Ellie's back pushed firmly up against the bark of a tree and he listened quietly to the surroundings. He could hear squirrels bouncing lightly in dry leaves, singing birds, and the orchestra of little bugs. Though the music of the woods was beautiful, Eli was growing tired of it even though it had only been 10 minutes. He would wait a little longer though, he thought, and that's when he heard something. It sounded like clicking. For whatever reason, it sounded familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Then he felt something similar to a cat's whisker tickling the side of his ear and a clear click as if someone had brought their face next to his ear and snapped their tongue. Eli jumped forward and turned to see where it came from. On the tree, a bit higher than what Eli expected because it had quickly scurried up, was a small white wood dragon. Eli took a sigh of relief. He had caught these types of dragons when he was a kid along with lizards, but since he didn't catch too many of them, he had forgotten the clicking noise they had made. Looking at the dragon, Eli thought maybe this was an omen. Perhaps if he didn't keep moving, Demetrius would sneak up on him just like this. Eli began stealthily sneaking through the forest, glancing at the back of every tree he passed, hoping to silently catch Demetrius off guard. After passing the horse and the supplies once, then twice, then a third time and a fourth, Eli became disinterested in protecting himself and only was interested in finding his brother. Where the hell is he? Eli mumbled, exasperated. Crunch. From behind Eli, leaves jumped up, and a wooden blade sliced through them. Thwack. Demetrius landed the first hit across the back of Ellie's neck. Eli grunted. The blow left a red line that had been made from the strike. It would definitely bruise. Eli immediately turned to meet his brother's eyes, sword ready. That really hurt. Temper your blows, damn it, shouted Eli. Don't be a pussy. Are you just going to yell at me, or are you going to hit me? Taunted Demetrius, sticking his tongue out. Eli thrust the tip of his wooden sword towards Demetrius's, but having already predicted Ellie's first move, Demetrius moved to the side and took Ellie's knee. You stepped forward too far. Are you ready to try now? I really thought. A swing came for his neck, cutting him off. Demetrius fell underneath the blade in a squat and sliced towards Ellie's hips. Eli sensed the counterattack and reacted, throwing himself over the slice, into a tumble. He only barely managed to clear the blade by rolling onto the ground, passing his brother, and back to his feet. The two of them regained their footing towards each other and began exchanging heavy blows. I can't tell what you're thinking, Demetrius. I can't keep up with your strategy, but if I can't outthink you, I'll just have to move faster than you can think. Demetrius systematically countered Ellie's attacks, and Eli reacted to Demetrius's. World facts. Even the most experienced swordsmen cannot match the strength and speed of someone who has learned to use magic energy. Though truly skilled swordsmen have killed jinn with skill alone, it has been because of the overconfidence of the jinn that such amazing feats have transpired. Though one might go throughout their whole life without facing someone with access to magical energy or a contract, it is still a possibility. Therefore, if a swordsman is to compete without coming across a teacher in such fields and unable to gain such skills through self-study, then it is imperative to find a magical item that may provide an edge if such a day occurs, though this too is a rare thing. Risk. Eli and Demetrius sat down, their backs to trees, both of them covered in bruises. Eli looked at his brother's face, noticing the little bit of stubble. I can't believe you guys are already having another kid. What do you think you'll be getting, a boy or girl? Asked Eli while still breathing heavily from the endless sparring. Demetrius let out a sigh because of the hits he had taken earlier. Probably a boy. The baby is growing fast and kicks a lot. He sounds tough, doesn't he? Asked Demetrius, chuckling. Well, if he's anything like his dad, I don't want to fight him. Even if he's only holding a wooden sword, I'll beg him to take it easy on me, said Eli, and both boys gave a laugh that was painful to the body but straight from the heart. You know, Eli, I want my kid to live in a warm world filled with people helping one another. A world where we care and laugh with others as much as we do with ourselves. A beautiful world where we pull people up to be on equal footing so that we can enjoy all of this together. Demetrius's eyes dazzled with honesty. He looked at that future with a certainty that it was something his son would experience. I want those that can't walk, to run. Eli thought for a second. You shine so bright, I want faith like that, I want to believe in that future too. For now let me run with you. I'm 2 points behind you, that's pretty close, but I think we have enough time for one more round. You look pretty tired, I think I'll take the win today, said Eli. You want to go one more round? Asked Demetrius, in a way that sounded like the question wasn't directed towards Eli but himself. Demetrius took a hard look at Eli. Wow, you've really grown up. Yeah, okay, one more round. I won't give it to you though. You're going to have to take it, said Demetrius, grabbing his sword. When he turned around, he saw something moving in a tree. As he looked at it, he realized the silhouette of the thing was looking back at him. A single eye was glowing in the shade, watching him. As the silhouette moved up the tree and into the light, Demetrius could see the creature clearly. One eye was drooping, not looking particularly at anything. It was dead and white, the fur around that area splotched. The other eye was small and black, and it was wild like a predator looking at its next meal. The face was similar to a dog but seemed far more ferocious and even evil. The beast smiled at Demetrius with its mouth full of teeth. The mangy-looking thing bolted down the tree with no effort and into the thick of the woods. Eli, we have to leave now, Demetrius yelled, heading to untie the horse. Eli, seeing his brother was serious, quickly pushed himself up and waited for Demetrius to mount. From the front side and rear, the sound of footsteps surrounded them. It sounded to be about 6 or 7 creatures running around them. An animalistic cackling filled the area seemingly from everywhere. Demetrius swung his body onto the horse, and Eli followed. Eli spotted one climbing to a branch beside them. The filthy thing was giving a nasty smile, wagging its long tail back and forth. "It's going to jump," Eli yelled, prompting Demetrius to crack the reins. The horse took off, and the cackling Gisbrid leaped toward the horse and began to chase after them. The laughing only grew more intense, and 4 other Gisbrids had rushed out from behind trees to join in the chase. It seemed that the wild monsters were no match for the horse's speed, and the siblings would get away, but from a tree, one of the crazy things jumped in front of the horse. It was a good steed, however, and quickly recovered, but as it passed the insane-looking beast, the creature's jaws locked down on Ellie's foot. In a moment, Eli could tell he wouldn't be able to pull his foot from his boot, and if he didn't loosen himself from his brother, he might be pulled off along with him, and so Eli allowed himself to be yanked off the horse. His body tumbled along the leaves and dirt, separating Eli from his boot and assailant. Though it was quite a fall, Eli didn't feel that anything was broken or any cut made that couldn't be treated. He scrambled to his feet. The smelly, wild-eyed beasts were now all targeting him and slowly surrounded Eli, forcing his heel to the edge of a gorge. As they displayed their ferocious jaws, large globs of drool trickled down their thick black lips. At the thought of having those yellow, wicked teeth bear down on his mushy skin, Eli, with very little reservation, closed his eyes, guarded his head, and threw himself down the side of the ravine. Eli thought he had heard Demetrius's yell as his body bounced, tumbled, and skidded in ways he didn't even know were possible. Should he live through this, he'd never complain about being hit by his brother ever again. As he went down, several bushes slowed his descent, and like a rag doll, Eli flopped onto a sandy area in the shallow river. It was only luck that his body hadn't fallen on some large stone, like the one just inches away. Eli twisted around disoriented for only a moment, blood dripping into the water. It slid off his cheek from one of his nostrils. His nose was broken. He had the wind knocked out of him and multiple gashes on his body, but he felt grateful to be alive. He pushed himself against the large rock near him and took a second to regain his breath before fishing for some strength. The cackling Gisbrids paced back and forth on the ridge above. Instinctively he knew if he didn't continue to move by nightfall, they'd find him and eat him. Eli looked at the wall of earth opposite to them. It was steeper than the fall he had just taken, and in his current condition it looked too much to climb. Eli took off his wet sock from his bootless foot and placed it into his pocket. He then managed to his feet and began pushing through the water, trekking downstream in the center of the river, hoping to find his escape. World facts. In the forest normally near streams is a creature called a jellau. The jellau seems to have a shell wrapped in a pinkish skin similar to a pig's. It has ridges across its back that carry electricity. Its body vibrates, creating lift, allowing it to float. To its front, underneath an egg-like protrusion, it has a small face, and to each side of its shell it has tentacles broken up at the end to make a type of pincer that it uses to manipulate objects and move through its environment. The creature is quite rare and is considered a fine, highly sought-after cuisine. If you should find one and kill it, please share some of its tender and flavorful meat with me. Asterisk asterisk. Once Eli had fallen off the horse, Demetrius had turned back for his brother only to see him throw himself off of the gorge. Demetrius had faith in his brother's resourcefulness and knew he would follow the stream towards home if possible, and it was in that direction he would meet him. The sun was going down and Lord Seorus had become uneasy that his sons hadn't returned. He turned to his guests, the king's servants and daughter. My apologies, I know that you've just come in, but I don't believe myself able to dine with you all tonight. I'll be putting together guards to help me search for my sons. Please enjoy the evening and excuse me. Hold on, said King Runtor. Allow me to find your sons. I have a way of finding others. Fetch me a horse and supplies, for if I should need them, I will be back before the food is cold. Lord Seorus bowed. Thank you, keep my sons safe. If I can or not will be up to them, but if I find them in good health, nothing will touch them. The air around the king had chilled. Legif. Through this word of power the world became covered in snow to the king's eyes. As he focused on the snow only he could see, footprints were appearing as if being made by an invisible figure. As Eli made his way down the river he had found a walking stick, from some random tree. It was this walking stick that was helping him make quick progress despite his missing boot. There came a point where the water had reached Ellie's waist, and despite having followed the flow of the river quite a ways, those unnerving chortled howls still followed above. The sun was beginning to set, and with the light dimming, nocturnal insects began to come out. Marmalade-colored lights zipped around like lightning, over and around the river. These glowing insects were dragon fairies. Really they were just dragonflies with a glowing abdomen, the glow from which would attract the moths they hunted. Though right now, they were a welcoming sight to Eli, who was growing more fearful of the approaching darkness each second. To be hunted in light is frightful, but to be hunted in the dark is terrifying. The moon had come out, and along with the dragon fairies, Eli could see a decent bit through each passing shadow, still putting him on his guard. Eli turned a bend in the river, and in front of him, about a half-mile off, was a bank. Ellie's numb and cold body splashed towards it, and with one step, the river's water was over his head. Paddling up, his head bobbed out of the water, and he coughed before gasping for breath. Laughing filled the air, and on the shore were the glowing yellow eyes of the cackling gisbrid. The beasts were running to the edge of the water and then quickly backing away. The one with the milky eye splashed into the freezing pool of water and began paddling toward Eli. On the shore, the other wicked predators squealed with laughter, as if egging on the wild one. Eli looked at the other side of the river. There was still a gorge, but it wasn't as steep as the one he'd fallen down. He would try to climb it. No, he had to, he thought. Eli threw his renowned stick at his relentless stalker, and frantically began to swim towards the wall of dirt, but the lazy-eyed fiend was quickly catching up. Despite Eli paddling harder, the realization that those teeth would soon be around his neck started to sink in. The water sloshed around him as if they had been put into a sieve and were being shaken violently by a gold panner. Eli was afraid because this force was pushing him towards the avilied monster he had been fleeing, but the animal was now crying out in fear, and the other cackling gisbrid were retreating into the forest. A tooth-comb red spine lifted out of the water, undulating violently. Its total length was about that of a red maple tree. All at once, the water seemed to part, pushing Eli towards the river's side. In the light of the moon, water sprinkled down a large reptilian head, similar to a crocodile. It had large bulbous amber eyes, its scaly skin was a dark green and faded yellow, its teeth like stalactites ready to fall on and puree the living. Looking at the whiskers on the lizard's face, Eli realized this ancient creature was a powerful and great water dragon. In the presence of this colossus serpent, the tiny gisbrid whimpered in fright. The monstrous dragon, hearing the cries, flung its jaws over its meal, disappearing with it under the water. Eli grasped onto a root hanging out of the bank and began climbing up, pulling at and pushing off of anything he could. He quickly made it a quarter of the way up and covered himself in dirt in the process. From a distance, Eli could hear the galloping of a horse. With hope in his heart, he began to call out, "Help me. If you can hear me, help me. I'm stuck on the side of the bank, and a dragon is in the water below." Eli heard the sound of the hoofs getting closer. His heart jumped with joy, and he screamed louder. I'm over here, he yelled. From over the edge, he heard a familiar voice. "Eli, I'm throwing down a rope. Wrap it, grab it and use your legs, I'll pull you up," said the voice that Eli knew all too well. Eli's eyes welled with tears. Never had he been so happy and relieved to hear his brother. "Demetrius, I love you, throw it down," shouted Eli, his voice cracking from the intense happiness. The rope had come down, and Eli brought it around his back, and tied it. He then brought his forearm around the main section and grabbed it tightly. "Bring me up," Eli hollered. The rope tightened, and Eli began to walk up the side of the bank with its help. About halfway up, Eli heard a bubbling underneath him. He glanced down, and protruding out of the water, was the top of the behemoth's head, its fiery eyes illuminated by the light of the dragon fairy. "Pull me up, pull me up, pull me up," screamed Eli. The rope was being quickly pulled up the gorge, and Eli worked quickly to keep up. The water dragon brought its huge neck out of the water with a deep gargled growl. The wet hot breath of death laid upon Ellie's chest. his entire body was clammy, filthy, and cold. Looking up at the edge he had so desired to reach, all hope had been blown out like a candle, and in this darkness Eli knew there was nothing more he could do if this monster wanted him dead. He wasn't capable of any significant strength that would be able to deny it. However, there was a voice echoing out to Eli, and before he was able to realize it, a powerful frigid air had pushed him by the center of the back up the little way he needed to go, and he stumbled safely over the edge of the bank and onto the promised land. The dragon let out a deep and mighty roar, and the old lizard plunged down, returning into the river's depths. Demetrius jumped off his horse, ran over to Eli, and firmly hugged him. Eli buried his face into his brother's shoulder and hugged him back. On the opposite side of the shore was a certain mysterious king holding his staff. "What kind of master would I be if I let my new pupil die?" said the king.